It really is me. You really meant that I was hosting this one. What do you usually say? Hey, gang. Welcome to the Formed by Jesus podcast. Oh, it's week 7. What are you saying?
Season 7.
Season 7. We call it by seasons?
I literally, when it's in the middle of a practice, yes.
Season 7, week 3, fasting. Glad you're here. Please don't leave. How was that? I'm still trying to find your sermon notes.
I didn't change them this week.
I noticed that. Yeah, I think you were pretty consistent. I can't find your sermon notes.
Off to a really good start.
Did you feel like this week was easier than the other one?
All I want to ask
Topic-wise?
you is, remember when you said it was going to be the roughest? You're like, oh, this one's going to be weak.
Yeah, I said that last week.
Yeah.
To try and get people interested in coming.
It worked.
Well, I think so.
No, did topic? I don't know. I enjoyed both. I really love the practice series. Like, they're so fun to study and to preach. So I don't know what question or what answer you're looking for.
Yeah, that's fair. I just sent it to you along. Okay.
Do you want me to airdrop it to you?
No, I'm going to find it.
This is getting ridiculous.
I know, it's not. This doesn't look good.
I see what you're doing. You're self-sabotaging so that you
Here
never
it is.
host again.
I just realized why I couldn't find it, but I can't tell you why on air.
Okay.
No, I can't. It's just because we sent it to someone else this week, additionally, that we don't usually send it to.
Yeah.
So that was throwing off when I was searching. Okay. I did say that. I did say that this one was going to be the roughest because I think in our prep, at least for me,
It was the fuzziest.
this was the fuzziest topic-wise, was confessing your need. Seemed to be a week where we were trying to talk about a lot of different things in one sort of broad theme. And I think it worked really well. But I think you were coming at it from the I think what you contributed really strongly was fasting helps you become aware of your frailty, your human body. You're going to die. You have to reconcile with that. Fasting is painful and it should be. And I was also coming in with the confessing your need also means it does something to your prayers. It amplifies them. It
Oh, right.
turns God's ear. So you can fast when you're trying to make a decision or when you're trying to couple it with prayer. And I think that you found a way to kind of merge it all into one thing that felt cohesive and good.
Yeah, so fasting defines reality was first half and then invites God to deliver you through it. It was the second half.
Yeah.
So you were more asking God to deliver you.
Mm-hmm.
I was more man, when you fast, you recognize you're going to die.
Yeah.
And I really love that idea, how fasting unearths, it's already laid within you, some of this wounds and wickedness and all sorts of things, the flesh coming to the surface. So,
And that's kind of when I wrote the fasting guide for this one that week, that's kind of how I started with the fasting is hard because it makes you aware that you need God to survive. You need food. And that's a reflection of how your soul needs God. And then it goes into confessing all of that, Ezra did when he was leading the Israelites back. They fasted for God's deliverance. And that seems to be a theme throughout the scriptures, is that fasting, when it helps you realize your imminence and your frailty.
yeah, talk about that, because imminence, I had to Google it because I was like, that's not what imminence means to me.
What did you think it meant?
Even we sang on Sunday imminence, but with an E.
Eminence?
His eminence is what I was interpreting when you said imminence.
Oh, imminence means your mortality, basically.
See, I thought imminence just mean something's imminent, so it's coming.
Yeah.
But I didn't immediately tie it to your mortality. I thought it was just the imminence of anything. Like the subway is imminent.
The subway is imminent. Yeah. I guess it's the same thing. Yeah. Something is imminent, an impending evil or danger. Our imminence, I think the implication is that what's coming and unavoidable for us is our death.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's what fasting does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it fun hosting?
This is, the camera's not even here. So I'm just talking to you. Isn't that what it's supposed to feel like? Just a conversation?
Yeah.
And this is not how we talk to each other. So I guess that's not.
Just so you know, that heart behind him that you kind of see was written by my daughter, Trinity. It was for Valentine's Day. So
Sweet.
yeah, she's an artist.
I forgot what we were saying.
Fasting, imminence, unearthing desires. One thing I do want to talk about is so interesting. We read Jonah 3, but Joel 2 is also very similar, where they recognize their wickedness and then they repent and they both say, who knows, maybe God will relent. But I like that we have a story of Ninevites who like have no covenant with God, who have no framework. They don't have a Torah, 10 Commandments. And then you have Joel, the people of God, who know what's right and still doing what's wrong. But fasting looks the same.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I don't know. In my mind, I was thinking fasting for somebody who hasn't believed, recognizes the gospel, and turns to him. There's a lot of similarities versus like you and I when we recognize just some of our own, oh man, we are far off. We need to repent. There's a lot of similar actions.
It's a great, I think, equalizing practice because it shows like all of us are still constantly in need of God and his provision and his like sustaining us. Like Colossians 1 talks about Jesus holds all things together. And, in Acts 17, when Paul is preaching the gospel in the Areopagus, he says, in him we live and move and have our being. So this idea that like God is somehow mysteriously like sustaining us even now, like even though we have a biological, physiological explanation for why our bodies are working, God is really the energy behind that or the person behind that, allowing that to function. And in that regard, we're no different than those who are also far from God, like the Ninevites. And I think that's a major theme through Jonah, especially, is like Jonah views himself as a prophet who's high and mighty and better than the Ninevites. And God is trying to teach him that you're really no better just because you've grown up an Israelite. Just because you're a prophet doesn't mean that I love you more. And should I not also care for Nineveh and for these other lost nations? And so it is really telling, I think, when they fast and you see that coupled in passages like Joel 2 or in Ezra or what is it, First or Second Chronicles?
Second Chronicles.
Second Chronicles. It just shows that that's the great equalizer. We're all kind of in the same position to demonstrate our need. And yeah, I think when fasting and prayer are coupled together, there seems to be some kind of effect that has on God and his resulting actions. And I think you touched on this too. This is a hard thing to balance where like sometimes we do fast because we like do want something from God, or we do need something, but fasting isn't a manipulative way to get it. It's more of a like humble response to our frailty. So
yeah, I really struggle with that. I trying to figure out, so fasting defines reality. And I think there's something about, we're trying to tie this in. I think you and I offline are talking about this a lot. But when you begin to define reality, the enemy is not super happy about it.
What do you mean by that? Define reality?
Well, both past and both present and future, and both negative and positive. What I said Sunday.
Negative and positive what?
So when you fast, you just so the sermons at formed-by-jesus.com/fasting.
I know you're not trying to reteach it, but
no, but when you fast, I think it does a couple things. I think for the negative, it does show your depravity. So we had already said that, right? Like when you fast, anger, lust, all those things come up. Mm-hmm. So then, even I think this is a great point because somebody asked me right after, "Hey, I too have noticed anger coming up. What do I do now?"
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, great, shoot, I probably should have like spent more time there. You invite the Holy Spirit to heal you, like help me, God, So it goes back to that surrender. So what's interesting, fasting feels like such an active practice because you're actively not eating. Like it just takes a lot within you, but it's to make space for the grace of God to do what only he can do. So it's okay, God, I'm here laying bare and vulnerable and I feel empty. God, would you heal me? God, would you release me from my anger? Is that how your answer would be as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think fasting, in two senses. One is it reminds you of your dependence on God, which we've talked about. But then, it defines, because we do, and I think Richard Foster in that quote you shared, which from Celebration of the Discipline.
Yep.
He talks about fasting what you're doing is removing all the things that you normally use to block reality, essentially, which is your anger, your passions, your lust, your sin, all that stuff. You're imminent. So we eat, like we feast, we overconsume as a way to try and prolong the inevitable, which is like our death. We're always trying to
Yeah.
avoid it and not think about it.
Well, we even do that like when, because Valentine's Day was last week. You broke up with somebody. Oh, you just need a tub of ice cream and watch a movie. Like, it is a way to get your mind off of things.
Yeah.
But it's still going to be there though. So it's just still a Band-Aid. So fasting rips it off and says, okay, this is reality and I need to face it. So the negative reality, positive reality, as you fast, your mind begins to gaze on the goodness of God. You begin to see reality for what it is, and that God still is good. His love does endure forever. That, you're feasting on the scriptures. So that's what I mean by positive. Also, when I said present, fasting just helps you see, like, I think we get so caught up in the day-to-day that we kind of don't see how God is already moving. So I have found when I'm fasting, it makes me more mindful of my surroundings, which was the whole joke about New York City missing out on Kelly Clarkson. It's just like, it does make you more present and aware and interruptible. And then the future is that Acts 13 where we're fasting and saying, God, what is the direction? And he reveals it to you. Sometimes by, a voice from heaven, other times by just, giving you that courage or counsel from others, all those sorts of things.
Opportunities, open doors, things like that.
Yeah. But I say all that to say, though, about the spiritual warfare thing. I'm not amazed anymore because every time we do a practice month, like circumstances in people's life, like cranks up a notch and it's hard. But I don't want to make those correlations though, because I don't know. But we have some people just struggling with things. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm really treading on ice. Did I use the right phrase this time?
I think
I was about
so.
to say water, but I don't.
You're treading water.
Treading on ice makes more sense.
You're walking on thin ice.
Walking on thin ice. Dang
You
it.
didn't say it right. Treading water is like you're trying to.
Good. Check off the list for today's podcast, though.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me, to say the least, that we have people from different walks of life at our church kind of going through the same thing. We'll keep it private at this point so that we're safe. But it's all happening at the same time. I don't know. I don't know where to go from there because I don't really have all the answers. But I just at least find it interesting.
Yeah. I think there's a. That's good. Where do you want me to go from there?
I don't know.
Spiritual
So
warfare,
I can blame you.
which wasn't in your sermon notes.
No.
Yeah, I think that that's what's weird about fasting is it's an embodiment of a spiritual reality. So the way that you like use your body in worship, or the way that you use your body to pray, it's similar in fasting. Like when you're fasting, you're saying something with your body that you would normally just say with your mind.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's painful. And then that's why, it goes back to week 1. Like we're physical beings and our souls, like our bodies are our souls. Like you can't divide and delineate so much. And so fasting is difficult because it connects you to the spiritual reality in a way that other practices can't. And so, yeah, I guess it's no wonder that we experience more hardship, more spiritual opposition, more negative circumstances. And I think that's the sort of the counter to like this idea that you want to fast to get something from God. Is like your life it's going to be harder before it gets better.
Which is why I read recently why revivals don't last long. Because the revival's fun in the beginning, this wonderful tsunami of grace, but then it takes humility and suffering to stay in it. It takes a lot from you. It's a burden that's still light, but it's still a burden. And so I've been thinking about that a lot. Just like, does God built character within us to receive and sustain revival? And I also heard recently a revival is essentially like what could happen in a person's life over a decade happens within like a couple weeks, so just like some miraculous things happening in people's lives, people getting saved by the droves, right? Like it wouldn't be that weird for, a church of our size to lead, I don't know, this is going to be the most random thing, like 100 people over 5 years. None of us would be like, wow. Be like, yeah, that's just the church being the church. But if 100 people in 1 week, you're like, all of a sudden, what is going on here?
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of humility. And I think fasting, though, when you look at revival, to go a whole nother way, revivals don't happen without prayer and fasting. Like it's very rare to see one without prayer and fasting.
Yeah. It's how the amount of times that prayer and fasting are coupled together in the Bible is pretty astounding. And I think we, for some reason, and again, I think it has to do with how post Enlightenment, we're mostly cognitive, and so we think of approaching God as an idea and approaching God with our minds. And so fasting, like I said, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, if spiritual maturity is only categorized by how much you know, then of course fasting, there's no room for it. It doesn't make sense. But if spiritual maturity is about your being, your body, who you are, how you represent the presence of God in the places that you go, then fasting is like a vital practice that cooperates with prayer to sort of tie the mental, cognitive, emotional aspect of prayer to like your physical embodied existence in a social context, is what Dallas Willard would say. So you're interacting with other people with your body, not just with your thoughts and ideas. And so, yeah, revival, I think, is one of the effects. It's sort of that thing we were talking about this Saturday too. Like, what does fasting get God's attention in a way that, like, what does that mean?
Right. Well, yeah.
Does God respond? Are there certain things that God wouldn't do if we didn't fast? I think it raises all sorts of questions about, like, if God is sovereign, what is he waiting? Are there more things that God is waiting for me to do? Like, where does that line end? Does he have his back turned to me? Is that why he feels far? And by fasting, I can make him love me more? We would say no, but functionally, that's what it feels like. So what is that?
Yeah, the Arthur Wallace quote is, "Heaven is ready to bend its ear to listen when someone prays with fasting." I don't know all the answers. We said on Sunday, two things can be true at the same time. Fasting does not earn us God's love, and fasting does seem to make our prayers more effective. But that's with humility, because we can fast and pray and do all the things, and the Lord's like, no, I'm not. This isn't my will. I'm not going to intervene the way you're asking. Which is why I heard the other day from John Tyson, which that's why we went to New York. You were there as well for the conference, talking about when you're fasting and praying, actually you should first just fast and wait to hear from God, because your prayers, you want to align your will with his, which we had talked about on Sunday as well. Jesus saying, not my will, but yours be done. And so having that humility to say, like, God, I am fasting, and here's my preferences, here's my desires, but I'm here to listen to you. What am I called to pray for? What do you want for this situation? And then pray on that behalf. Okay, I feel like I've gotten a word. This is the direction, so I'm going to keep asking you. Luke 18 is like the persistent, like God, we're supposed to pray with persistence. I think fasting is that sense of like, no, I'm focusing on this. I'm persistent in this. The rest of that quote was, when a person is willing to set aside the legitimate appetites of the body to concentrate on the work of praying, they're demonstrating that they mean business. I think of when we fast, we are refusing a third soil life. We're getting rid of the chokehold of the worries of this age, of the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things. So I don't know, man. There's something to it. But also, what a beautiful image that I find a lot of rest and joy in God's sovereignty. And at the same time, I find a lot of rest and joy that he is inviting me to be a part of his story. And if I don't take that invitation, he'll find someone else who will.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have so many thoughts. Like I often wonder, like, what would have happened if Paul, after his Damascus Road experience, just left. Like that changed him, because I think he had to wrestle and keep saying yes to each new instruction or invitation from God. But I think had he said no, I don't think it would have been like mission gone. I think God would have been like, all right, I'm going to this other guy.
Which is why in New York, that's what was so profound. We will not die in Haran. Mm-hmm. Abraham's father, in Genesis 11, it seems that he's the one who's told to go to Canaan. But then through pain and sorrow and trials, he stops halfway or midway, not halfway exactly, but midway at some point, and says, you know what, I'm going to die here. So then that assignment goes to his son, Abraham. There's something about that.
Yeah. I think of it too, like, it's for all of the passages, there's still that element of like, Jesus teaches about God being like a father, and the way that we approach him is like a father. And I think I want to hold, like you said, we can hold two things to be true at the same time. So there is what I want when I'm fasting is to submit my will to God's will. But then also, and this might not be a good illustration, but like my kids are at the age right now where like, I'm trying to teach them, instead of saying, I want juice, I want you to say like, can I have juice, please? Just say please, like I'll take it. And fasting, I think, is kind of like the please, because it puts us in like so it's not like I'm not paying attention to them. It's like I have the juice and I want to give it to them, but I want them to realize that like they're asking me for something. There's a posture of humility that comes with fasting that I think God is waiting for. And so like it takes a lot of humility to ask for something.
And a lot of the blessings the Lord wants to give, we have to have the character to receive and sustain it.
Mm-hmm.
And so fasting is showing you're building that character to be able to receive a grace from God that doesn't turn into a spoiled child. Like you're able to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's something about like, James says you have not because you ask not. And then when you do ask,
spend it on your pleasures.
You ask with horrible motivations because you just want to spend it on your pleasures. So fasting, I think, does both of those in that it
says no to pleasures,
puts you in a position to humble yourself to where you do have to ask for your daily bread. Like the little things that you want and also the things that like you need. Jesus talks about like, what kind of dad is going to give his kid a snake if he asks for, whatever. Yeah. So like, I think God's desire is to give us good things. He's not a withholding God. So fasting does put us in that posture of humility to where we can, with our bodies, say we're submitting ourselves. Let me say
fasting as a cadence. I think long-term fasting puts you there. Like if you fast one time, I'm not sure you could experience these things.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
You get what I'm saying? Yes, there's also a caveat to that as well. But there is something about like making this a practice. I think there's, I don't know. I'm now contradicting myself because you never know what the Holy Spirit can do with one day of fasting. But I have found then it's safe. In my personal testimony, that type of building and that type of dependence, when I have 2 great days of fasting, that's great. But when it becomes a rhythm in my life, that like begins to build deeper and deeper, which is why we're hoping this isn't something like, oh, we did the fast thing and we'll never have to do it again.
Yeah, that was the second thing I was going to say, which is it puts you in the posture of humility, but then it also slowly, as you do it over time, changes your will. So that you do, so like I think James is 2 parts. You have not because you ask not. So part 1 is just asking, but then the other part is ridding yourself of those pleasures and the mixed motivations so that you do start asking for the things that are in line with God's will, which I think is where the Tyson thing comes in. It's like there's a part of fasting where you're submitting yourself and asking at the same time. So yeah, the cadence is huge, the rhythm, having a regular, putting it in your routine 1 day a week or 1 day a month or something like that. Yeah.
I also don't think it's a sign of immaturity to pray for something and then be disappointed that God answers in a different way. I think God just refines us that way. So to go to that final point, the way the Lord, when we fast, we can expect deliverance in one of 3 ways. One is just a straight up rescue, like you're asking to be rescued from a situation or for a burden to be released or a disease to be healed. And sometimes the Lord does that, and we just need to give God glory. But we are dishonoring when we say that's the only way God answers those fasts and prayers. So the other way is refinement. So one line I said is a lot of my prayers to God in the beginning years and now, I was really just asking for emotional high, but thankfully the Lord wanted to give me emotional maturity. So instead of rescuing me from situations, he put me through the fire and is refining me through it. And I'm grateful, as Dallas Willard says, the most important thing God gets out of your life is the person you become. I think if I was always rescued, I would never even enjoy now. And I'm so looking forward to decades to come, what character can do for me. In the same way, like with my kids, when they struggle, I'm not going to rescue them from every situation. I need to see them to struggle and to fight and to learn and to be humbled. All of that is a part of the growth process. So we have to be reminded of that. But refinement's hard. All right, someone's at our house. But the worst part, what in the world is happening? All right, go ahead. I need to check the rain. See who this guy is.
Go ahead. Is there someone really at your door?
Oh, then he left. Oh, why? Okay. Why do people do that? He literally just dropped off a package, but he rang the doorbell leaving.
Yeah.
Just drop the package and leave. Okay. But the third way and the hardest way, but it's also the most hopeful way, do you see, is resurrection. So it's...
which is the ultimate answer. Like that...
It's always the ultimate answer.
Yeah. Every prayer that you pray that is in line with God's will will be answered with a yes. Whether that happens on this side of... in the old creation or the new is sort of the question.
That's why the best is yet to come is technically always true.
Yeah.
Because the best is after death.
In like the eternal sense, the long term, like you will die.
Yeah.
And then Jesus will come back and restore heaven and earth.
But of course, we're not dishonoring to God when we say, no, Lord, rescue this person from this disease. Like, we're pleading with you.
Yeah, that person
But also
will be
we're trusting.
rescued at some point, whether it's now or I think that's the hard thing is we're asking for part of that future to be brought here into the present.
I didn't realize this till a couple of years ago. Every single person that God has healed, they do die. Like Lazarus, poor Lazarus, he had to die twice. Like when you think about it, it's like, I know what's coming, you know?
But so the opposite, I heard like someone said this, I can't remember who, years ago, I heard this, someone preached like, how do you scare him? Like, what do you think the Pharisees, how did they threaten Lazarus after that? So someone who's been through death is like, what, are you going to kill me?
Oh, right.
I've been through it. I know what's happening. Like, I know what's on the other side of this. I know, like, I've been resurrected once, I'll be resurrected again.
Isn't that fascinating? We don't see him in history after that. Like, you'd think he would just be.
Yeah. He's mentioned
Killing
one,
it.
I think one other time in John, they mentioned him reclining with Jesus at a dinner or something.
But I think that was before the death, right?
No, I think it was after. It was because I think John says it was Lazarus whom Jesus had raised. I think.
Yes, but I thought it was like this guy around town because he's the one he raised, but he wasn't raised yet. That's how I interpret it. That'd be fascinating to look at a chronological timeline.
Yeah. Interesting.
But what a life.
Yeah. How do you scare someone like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rescue, refinement, resurrection, all of it will one day result in resurrection. But between now and then, it's either part of that. God, I think, essentially saying, yeah, I'm going to rescue. I'm going to bring part of that resurrection future into your present reality. Or sometimes it's no, you got to wait a little longer.
One prayer that helps me in this when the answer is just ultimately resurrection, right? Or when, let's just say when the answer isn't what you thought it would be, it's, Lord, I don't understand you, but I trust you. I think that's the heartbeat of fasting too, to get to that point. Here's what I want. And then let's say that's not what you got. I don't understand you. So I'm going to be honest there, God. This hurts. This isn't how I would have answered it. But I trust you. Your ways are higher than my ways. Your thoughts are higher than my thoughts. In fasting, I'm reminded you're a God and I am not. I can't even barely survive without food, so just that posture. Anyways, I just wanted to mention this is a heavy topic, but man, what a joy it is at the same time to be able to present your requests to God and through fasting, just kind of bring clarity to what is actually happening around you and just trusting God in the midst of all of it. You're the host. How are you going to close this one? This was a quick one.
Yeah, this was a quick one. You're wrapping up. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really hard, this is just going to bring up more topics. I think it's a really easy thing to say and a hard thing to like.
Yes.
I understand you, but I trust you can easily turn into like a cliche that we just say as a response to tragedy, without meaning and without really praying that. Like, what does it mean to really trust God with something? Is like,
that's funny to see that from a cynical way. Anytime I've ever heard that, I'm like, oh, what a joy. Like, it's been so good to me.
I think what it requires you to give up, like Abraham sacrificing Isaac. I don't understand you, God, but I'm going to trust you. Like, that's a hard prayer. And I think I don't think it's cynicism, but I think it is like the person who's been through something or been forced to give up the Isaac or the Job who lost his whole family. And it's like, for that person to say, I don't understand you, but I trust you is a really hard, I think a lot of people carry emotional baggage with like, I'm okay trusting God if I lose my job, but losing my kid, I understand you, but I don't understand you, but I trust you. That's a hard thing. So yeah, I think fasting does position us to get there as it defines that reality and it trains us. And then it ultimately points our hope in a future where God will answer those with a yes. So yeah, that's good. Depressing note. Sorry. I think I do that too often. I guess I'm closing. Comment treading on ice.
It happens every podcast.
Yeah.
It's not by design either.
If you watched all the way. Bye.